All right. So we're going to start diving into our Rick and Morty exercise here. We're going to take it from phase one all the way through phase four, and we're going to see this application get built out from scratch. So starting off with our very first phase of the Rick and Morty exercise, we have create a project for the Rick and Morty show. By the end of this assignment, your project should meet the following requirements. V plus React development environment, a homepage, app, and router. React browser router to app.jsx, where the homepage should return a quick attention getter to get people to watch this application. All right, so first I'm going to go ahead and create Vite. I want it to be within this directory, so I'm just going to put a period afterwards so I don't get it in a nested directory. I'm going to utilize React, JavaScript. I'm going to npm install my entire project. And then I'm going to install React Router DOM because I know that is something I'm going to utilize. I'm not going to necessarily worry about Bootstrap for a while. Once I need it, I'll install it. And same thing for Axios. So now I have my source. I have app.jsx, which is returning some information here. I'm actually going to get rid of all the default CSS that comes in or all the templated stuff that comes in with Vite. Although it is great, I don't want it. Get rid of all of this as well. And I'm just going to put an H1 that says Rick and Morty. All right. And currently I should have a homepage that returns an attention getter. So let's go into that. I'm going to go ahead and, you know what? I'm going to utilize two servers or two terminals. One will host my V application and the other one I'll use it to manipulate directories or files. So I'll change directory into source. From there, I'm going to make a directory named pages. And inside of pages, I'm going to create a homepage JSX. I'm going to open up code homepage and create a function called homepage that does not take in any props. And it is simply going to return let's say an H2 of here's why you should watch Rick and Morty. Then I'm going to go ahead and open up a paragraph tag, but because it needs a parent division, I'm just going to put it inside of fragment tags. And here I'm just going to put a lorem ipsum where I'm going to say, oh, well, because it's awesome. And I just noticed that I misspelled because, so it kind of takes away from my awesomeness here, but that is okay. Gonna add some lorem ipsum just to fill up the page. And there it is. There's my homepage JSX. It is now an element that can be returned. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and create my router now. Notice that I'm creating it inside of my source directory. So I'm gonna go ahead and do touch router.jsx. I'm going to code router.jsx. Now in router.jsx, all I'm simply going to do is I'm going to create a router. So const router, and router will be assigned to the return value of create browser router from React Router DOM that takes in an array of objects. All right. In my very first object, I'm going to describe a path. In this case, it will be index. The element that I will render will be app. And the children that app will have will be an array of objects again. In this case, since it's the home page, it will be set at index, and the element that I want to render will be the home page. And I noticed that neither of them were imported, so that means that there is a problem here. I didn't export. So now I can go back to my router and import both of them. All right, so that creates my router. I'm going to go ahead and export default my router and save this. You can see that some of my syntax was fixed by my extension, but everything else went great. Okay, so now that's done. And inside of app.jsx, the only thing left is to connect the outlet so that I can see the children showing up in my outlet. Now this should raise an error. It looks like it doesn't, but I can't see my application just yet. And that's because currently in main.jsx, I am not providing a router. I am only providing app.jsx. So here I need to specify, hey, I have a router provider where the router will be the router that I've just created myself. And it looks like we can't recognize it. That's okay. We'll import it afterwards. Did I misspell router? Const router.
I think you have to import router provider first.
I think I did. Yeah, we have router provider there. Import router from router.jsx. All right, for some reason it wasn't recognizing it, but you can see that it worked. It was able to implement it, and I have my router showing up. All right, so here's why you should watch Rick and Morty. Well, because it's awesome, and then some lorem ipsum coming afterwards. All right, so that finishes phase 1 of the Rick and Morty exercise. I'm going to do a quick recap of what I just did. I created a directory named pages, where inside of pages, I created a file named homepage that returns a JSX element with an H2 and a paragraph tag. Within app.jsx, I added an outlet so I can visualize the children of the app. In router.jsx, I created a browser router utilizing the create browser router function, where the path of index renders the app. And at index within the app, we can see the homepage being nested as our default child. In main.jsx, I then added a router provider where the router is matched to the router that I created in router.jsx. Does anyone have any questions regarding phase 1 of the Rick and Morty exercise? Easy peasy. No questions. I don't see anything in Yankee questions either. All right, then I will move on to phase 2. So in phase 2 of the Rick and Morty exercise, by the end of this assignment, your project should meet the following requirements. We need an about page, a characters page, that will return all of the characters from the Rick and Morty API. So I'm gonna need to copy that link address and bring it over here so that I can actually see it. Here's the Rick and Morty API. We'll take a look at some documentation here shortly. All right, and I can see there's some suggestions for use state, use effect, Axios, and async. All right, I have a couple of routes. I see there's a not found, an error page, a nav bar. And then it goes into saying, hey, you might want to include Cypress or React Bootstrap. So I think we'll utilize React Bootstrap just for time purposes. Otherwise, I would definitely love to set up Tailwind. And we're going to go ahead and skip the part of Cypress until we finish our project. So let's get this started. I think the easiest place to start is by creating the rest of our pages. So I'm going to change directory back into pages. Here inside of pages, I'm going to make an about page. I'm going to make a characters page. And a not found page. And an error page. All right. So that should be all of my pages. Perfect. And it also tells me that I'm going to need a navigation bar. So I can go back one into my source. And here I can create a different directory named components. And inside of components, I'm going to need a navigation bar. And I am going to need likely a character card. All right, that should take care of all the components that I'll need to include my nav bar and my character card. So let's go into adding these pages here. So const my about page that returns a JSX component. In this case, we're just going to add an H2 tag that says about Rick and Morty. And in here, we're just going to make a paragraph tag with some lorem ipsum to make it nice and decorative. And then we'll export default. All right, I'm gonna actually take this template here because we will likely need something similar for the characters page. Except here, I'm going to actually take a look at characters. So characters. And I'm going to change this to characters page. All right. And finally, we have our error page, which looks almost similar. So there's my error page. And all I'm going to do is return an H1 element that says something went wrong. I'm going to go to my not found page. And this will return an H2 because this will show up within the children that says this route is not supported by this site. And then I'm just going to simply change this to not found. All right, so that takes care of all of my pages. All of my pages are now JSX components and they can be imported inside of my router. Before I go into making my router, I'm gonna actually create my navbar with a couple of navigation links here. So I'm gonna say const navbar. It's my function. And what it is going to return is a UL. I'm gonna add a little bit of inline styling here. More than likely, most of my styling for this lesson will be inline styling, just so I don't have to mess around with extra files. So I apologize. If you guys decide that you would like to see it separate, please let me know and I could always adjust. Okay, displays flex, justify content. And here we'll go with space around. Easy peasy. All right. Now I can go ahead and add a couple of list items. And here we'll go ahead and add a link. Because I'm working with my router, I'll import link from React Router DOM. This link will go to index, which will be my home. And then from there, I can just copy and paste. My next link will go to about. Next link will go to characters. Capitalize that. All right, so there's my 3 links. I have my navigation bar. Now I can export default my nav bar. All right, my nav bar is a component, so I need to utilize it within my app.jsx. So I'm going to go to app and bring in my nav bar. Those links haven't been connected yet, so that should raise an error if I try to access those links. So I'm going to come over to my router and actually create those children. So now my path will be my about. For my path, I will have an element of about page. Oh, come on. I was really hoping it would do the import statements for me, but that's okay. Next, I need a path for characters, which will render the element of the characters page. Finally, I need a not found page, so this one will be a path for a wildcard. And it will return the element of not found. And then I need to add an error boundary. So here's my error element of error page. All right, so there's my error element. All of my children have been implemented. Everything looks great, but unfortunately, there should be an error. Let me make sure. Yep, there's our error. If I take a look at the error by inspecting, come over to console, you can see that I get, hey, about page is not defined. Okay, perfect, not a problem. I know that that's happening because I haven't imported. So let's go ahead and import about page from pages at about page. We need to import characters page from pages at characters page. We need to import the error page from pages at error page. And we need to import my not found page from pages not found. All right, there you go. So now that I've added all of the URL patterns and their corresponding elements, I have a little bit of navigation here. If I open it up, I can go to the about page. It shows me my about Rick and Morty. If I go to characters, it shows me characters, Rick and Morty, and then the paragraph tag of characters. If I were to add some gibberish into my URL, we get this route is not supported by this site. And if I were to try to break my application somehow, I don't know how to break my application. Let's do this. There you go. So that breaks my application, and we can see that something went wrong. All right. So all of my requirements have been met for the portion of navigation. Now I need to work into the portion of seeing all of my characters. So this is where React Bootstrap is going to come into play. So let's go over to React Bootstrap. We're going to go to Get Started. And you know what? This might be a little bit too much of a jump. So let me pause here and open up for questions. Does anyone have any questions regarding the navigation, how I plugged in the elements, and how I plugged in all of the different routes?
Can you click on one of on the live server? If you go back to live server, the document page. Yeah, and then like home or about, if you can just click on one. Got you. Okay. Yeah, it was just something different. I don't recall in your router.jsx file doing like both slashes. I think I just did one, but it looks like it works both ways, I guess.
Oh, the initial slash? Yeah, the initial
Yeah,
slash is not a necessity. You don't always have to add it. I add it just because I'm traumatized and I I want to make sure that it always starts from the very beginning.
got you. Okay, okay. Appreciate it.
Of course. Juan?
Question for the Axios and the Bootstrap. Are you importing that later for a reason, or is it like personal preference, or just bad practice to just install everything right from the jump?
You want to make sure that you install what you're actually going to need. If you install a library and you find out, hey, I actually didn't need it, now it's a dev dependency now, right? So you're gonna have to go into your package JSON, find where that dependency is, then you'll have to go into your node modules and remove it by hand. It's a whole mess. So you want to make sure that you only install things that you know you're going to need for sure. All right, awesome. Any other questions? Okay. I see that there are no questions, so I'm going to push forward here and move into our installment of React Bootstrap. So there we can see it gives me the command for how to install. I'm going to change directory one back. Oh, go ahead, Demi.
My bad. I was muted. I was just seeing if you could go over the not found request real quick, just again.
Yeah, of
The
course.
not found page and the error page.
Got it. So the difference between the not found page and the error is once the application is broken. And the not found is just simply, hey, you're trying to type in a URL pattern or access a URL pattern that doesn't exist, right? So for example, if we go to GitHub and we try to access something that doesn't exist, so github.com, and I just type in a bunch of gibberish, it goes to 404 not found, right? This is their not found page being implemented. Whereas if I go to GitHub and I go to my profile, it shows me my own profile, right? If I go into my error page, that means something is broken. I'm not gonna pretend like I know how to break GitHub, so I can't really that portion.
No, you're good.
But if
Yeah.
something were to break inside of GitHub, it would show me a 500 error page and tell me that something is broken. Does that
Gotcha. And no, that's perfect. Can you go to the files as well? The JSX files?
absolutely?
Maybe kind of go over it.
Got it. So here's our not found page, which just returns an H2 element. So if I come over and I type in gibberish, we can see the not found page gets triggered, right? We could see it inside of the children. My application still renders and it shows me the not found page as a child. But if I break my application, so if I do something like counter plus equals 1, that should break my application. Now it's not showing me the app, it's only showing me the error boundary. And that's happening because in router JSX, this is essentially a try and catch. It's saying try to render the app and all of its children, but if something goes wrong, here's my catch statement, render the error page.
Gotcha. And you just called it error element, or is that just a common naming convention, or like what you're supposed to do?
I named it error page. You don't have to name it exactly that. Maybe you have different pages for specific errors. Um, I'm not sure if this is, I think this one is as long as you describe it correctly and it's specific enough to that you know what that page is returning, that's what really matters.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Of course. Gary?
Would you mind going over the nav bar again?
Absolutely. So the navbar is utilizing links because anchor tags will refresh my entire site, right? They actually send a request. So I don't want to utilize anchor tags. I don't want my application to re-render. I am working within a single page application. So I need to utilize a link tag to ensure that the application doesn't send a request to the server. Let me comment that out. There you go. What's breaking now? There you go. So I'm utilizing a link tag. This to element corresponds to all of the different paths that I've described. So that's what's happening in this to element. It's essentially the same thing as providing an href inside of an anchor tag. And then these are just the labels. Did that address your question?
It did. It did. Thank you.
Awesome. Owen?
How would it look if you didn't didn't use the bootstrap component of link? Would it just be an anchor tag with the to statement still, or is it not really good practice to not use the React Bootstrap link?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just want to make sure that this is clarified. This is not from React Bootstrap. This is from React Router.
Oh, okay, never mind. That clears it up.
All right, perfect. Demi?
Don't you also, well, I think you would use something like to and as or something like that. So what was, if you could remind me, like what was that as for?
Yes, so that's for React Bootstrap, and we could
Oh,
definitely
that is.
right now
Okay.
once I install it. Of
Got you. Okay, okay. Thank you.
course. All right. Any other questions? Okay, perfect. We're making some good progress, so let's continue digging in here. Did I install? I did not install. Let me go ahead and copy this one more time and actually install React Bootstrap. Shaker's in the way. All right. And let's come over to, I believe it's main.jsx, where I have to put in this React Bootstrap for their CSS file. Here it is. Alrighty, so that gets my CSS file. I can see that the font already changed. Things are looking a little bit different. That's because React Bootstrap CSS is now interacting with my site. So React Bootstrap has been successfully installed. And now I can go ahead and install Axios. All right, there you go. So now I have Axios and I have React Bootstrap. So before I go into the character page and making my life a little bit more complicated than what it needs to be, I'm going to go ahead and go into the into the character card and making my life more complicated than it needs to be. I'm going to go into the characters page and concentrate on the fetching of data and how to save said data. So first, I need all of the characters that are coming within this application. So I'm going to go to get all characters. This gives me a little bit of pagination. That's great. I'm going to go into how to work pagination here shortly. But the main thing that I care about is this results attribute. For each character inside of the Brick and Morty API, I have an object that has the corresponding key value pairs for how to represent this character. And that is within results. So let's go into getting these characters. So I'm going to make a function named get characters. This function is going to be an asynchronous function. That's just preference. I could definitely make it into an async in a way, or excuse me, a .then and I am losing my train of thought here. I could make it into an async in a way, or I could utilize .then. It's all 100% preference. So now I can go ahead and go into creating my function where I say let response is equal to await. And this is going to utilize Axios, the get method, because I want to send a get request. And I'm going to send it to the following pattern here. Once I have that response, I don't really even need response. I can just grab data. And that will do it as well. That gives me the data object within said response. And let's just go ahead and console.log data for now. Now, I want this to happen every time the characters page is rendered on the screen. So since I want this to happen every time the page renders on the screen, I'm going to utilize useEffect. And I'm going to call the function of get characters. And I'm going to leave it with an empty dependency list. Now remember, useEffect is a function that takes in two parameters. The first parameter being a function, and the second parameter being a dependency array. What we want it to do is only when the page mounts to run the body of said function. So we leave the dependency array empty because that's the only time we want it to trigger is just once. And what the function will do is trigger my get characters function. That's all we're doing. Now, you can make the argument, why didn't I just make my useEffect the body of this asynchronous function that I have up here? The reason behind that is because React does not like it when you turn useEffects into asynchronous functions. It gets in the way of its mounting and its way of rendering information. So you have to create the function separately. All right, now let's take a look at our console and see what we get here. Gonna go ahead and refresh my site. Looks like I have 8 user messages. They're all wordings, perfect. Nothing important as of now. I click on characters. And if I look at my log in my console, I have 2 keys. I have an object with 2 keys. info and results. Results holding 20 objects representing each individual character, and info holding the total count of characters, their next page, their previous page, and the total number of pages. All right, does anyone have any questions over how I utilize Axios to get this information?
Just one more time with use effect. Just so I'm understanding, you're using the function get characters. So like anytime it has to make a request or re-renders, instead of refreshing the entire page, it's just refreshing locally, I guess.
Got it. That's a great question. So every time the characters page renders, so every time characters page renders, it runs our entire script from top to bottom. Right, from top to bottom. So it sees the get characters, it creates it, but it doesn't execute this function. It just creates it. It gets to the use effect, and the use effect is more of like a, hey, this is happening in the background. It's, oh wow, that is a disgusting stop sign. That's supposed to be a stop sign, everyone. And then our return element gets actually rendered onto our screen. So the return element gets rendered into the screen. Right? From there, it checks our dependency array and it sees, oh, it's empty. Okay, perfect. Well, I'm only going to run this function once. So it looks inside of the function and it sees, hey, the only thing we're supposed to do is call get characters. So get characters gets called. That sends a request over to the Rick and Morty API. So let's just make a box here and pretend that's a server. The response comes back because we know that that's waiting for a response. And then we log it into the console, which is what we're seeing. That is a total mess in my screen. I hope that that made sense. Did
Yeah,
that?
you confused me more.
I confused you more? I apologize.
Yeah,
Okay. Let me see what I can do here. All right, so just to clean up use effect is only happening when the component renders. And what use effect is doing is it's only triggering the parts that are within the function. In this case, its only action is to get characters. Unless there is something in the dependency list, this is only happening once when the page renders.
okay.
All right, awesome. Jacob?
Yeah, can you kind of explain data a little bit on line 7, where what that's actually like referring to as far as data goes?
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So whenever we run data, or when I do this curly brackets data, let's take a look at what the response element actually looks like. I'm going to go ahead and re-render this here. So the response element, if we take a look here, it is an object that has a couple of different key value pairs. It has config, data, headers, request, status, and status.txt, right? Well, data is what holds info and results. This is the only information that I care about. So instead of grabbing the entire response, I am simply saying, hey, I don't need all of this. I just want to grab the data portion out of the response. And that's how we get just info and results showing up on the console.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Of course. James?
Back to use effect a little bit. So currently the dependency is blank, like you said, and that only lets it run once. Are you only allowed to pass in use state variables as dependencies for use effect? Is that correct, or can you pass anything into that dependency?
No, you only want use state variables because they interact with the virtual DOM, and that's what triggers the use effect. So the dependency
Right.
list will always be use state variables.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Of course. Owen?
This might be getting ahead. Are we going to be required to utilize pagination on the assessment?
You will not be required to utilize pagination in the assessment.
Okay, then I was like, if you said yes, I was going to ask if you could display that using the Rick and Morty API, but I guess it's not really required. Also, you don't have a space on the left side of data on line 7.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
We'll definitely be covering pagination here shortly, but it won't be part of your assessment. All right. All right, so now we have data. We have all of my information to be able to get the Rick and Morty API or to interact with the Rick and Morty API. Now I need a place to store said information. Well, as we talked about earlier, there is such a thing as use state. So I'm going to create a characters and set characters state. This will be a use state. And this use state will be an empty array because I know I am going to set it to an array of objects. So I know it's going to be an array of objects. So I'm just going to initialize it as an array to start with, so I can already start working with it within my application. All right. So now I want to save the results portion of my data inside of this characters. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to say set characters to data.results. And now let's take a look at what we have. So I'm going to have this use effect here. What it's going to do is it's going to console log the value of characters. And it's going to do that every time the value of characters changes. All right. So I refresh my page. We can see that we have a couple of messages here. So first I have a bunch of warnings. Well, let me go ahead and do this. All right, there you go. So here's inside of info is showing me all of my log statements. The very first one shows me, hey, in characters page, JSX, line 13, I am telling you to log the value of the console. Well, the initial value is an empty array. And that's why I get this empty array here. It's telling me, hey, the length of this array is 0. Well, in this other use effect, I am sending the request. The request comes back with data, and then I'm setting the value of characters to data results. Well, now the value of characters has changed. So my use effect says in the dependency array, I need to make sure that if the value of characters changes, I trigger this function again. So the value of characters changed, that if statement evaluates to true. So it triggers the function and it says, hey, I want to log the value of characters. And now we can see that the new value of characters is an array of 20 objects. Does anyone have any questions over that? Let's hear it, Owen.
I haven't been in the Pokemon API recently. Does it utilize pagination, and that's why? Or wait, this is the Rick and Morty API. Never mind. Stupid question.
No such thing, but thank you for asking. Next question. Let's hear it, Tristan. I see it. You're trying to formulate the question in your head. What's going on?
I am sponging right now and just absorbing.
All right.
Also, I'm trying to write down on my notes.
Awesome. Let's hear it, James.
Currently the second use effect on, or I guess now the first one on line 12 through 14, you're really just using that currently to console log and show what's happening? Are you gonna utilize it later?
No, I'm not going to utilize it later. Right now I'm only utilizing it so I could see the value of characters page change.
Right, okay, cool.
Awesome. Gary?
Just want to make sure. So, what exactly is pagination?
We haven't gotten there yet, and I will be able to answer that better once I actually cover it,
Okay, sounds good. I thought I missed something. Thank you.
of course. James?
Yes, do order matter on your file here? Like how you got two use effects right there? Or does order not play a part in it?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. So both of these are happening asynchronously. So they're not really going to clash into one another. If I change these as far as an order goes and render my application again, you'll see that everything still happens the same way, right? So this will only trigger once to get my character's information. This will trigger upon the element rendering. So both of these start at the same time, right? This one finishes logging onto the console. That's why I get my empty array. This is an asynchronous function that is still waiting for a request to come back. Once that response comes back and it changes the value of characters, this use effect gets triggered a second time, and that's how we get that second console.log. So they're not necessarily going to clash into one another. They would only clash into one another if they're sharing a dependency array. Does that answer your question, James?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, perfect. So now I have a way to actually store my characters. I can visually see inside of my log or inside of my console that they're being stored properly. So now it's time to display them. Well, let me go ahead and go into this division. And I'm going to add a little bit of inline styling. Display flex, justify content. Or you know what, we'll just utilize gap instead. 5 min. And we'll say that the width is 100%. Every time I feel confident in my keyboard skills, I do stuff like this, and it makes me unconfident of my keyboard skills. All right, so I added a max and min width to make sure that it stays at 100%. And then finally, I could do something like flex wrap and set that to wrap. All right, so there's all of my styling for my division. And finally, I can go ahead and iterate my characters. So I can say characters.map. Here I'm going to reference an individual character. Oh. That is just a variable. And I want this to automatically return a division with the class name of card. And this card division will return, oh, I also need this to have a key, which in this case will utilize character.id. If I take a look at my object, you can see that every object in here has an ID. All right, I can then run an image tag that will have the source of character dot, let me see what we have here. We have image. And then I can see the name. So that I will just put in a simple p tag. And what it will return will be the character name. All right. So it looks like the majority of it is working. Let me see what's happening here. Why isn't it showing my image? If I inspect, go over to the console. Oh, that is a mess. Images are recognized in the browser. This is supposed to be IMG and not image, huh? Did I totally messed that up? Yes, I did. Look at that. Boot mistake. All right. So there we have all of our images inside of our cards. I utilized the class name of card, so it looks like React Bootstrap is interacting with this and already trying to set it for a card for me, even though I haven't brought it in just yet. But now I can see all of my cards. All right. does anyone have any questions over this block of code here? What exactly is happening and how we can see all of our characters being rendered on the screen? Let's hear it, Ryan.
Actually with the one right above it with the styling you have for the div, is the assessment looking for us to like specifically do anything like that, or could we use Tailwind for our own purposes to just do it how we want? Or
You could utilize Tailwind. There is one specific part of the assessment that is asking for a styling, but it has to do with color and reactive color, not with the entire dynamic of your website.
got it. Thank you.
Of course. Any other questions? All right, so there we have all of our cards. Everything seems to be working great. Well, now let's go into some pagination. Now, this next portion that I'm about to cover is not going to be in the assessment. So if you want to completely just block me out for the next 10 minutes, you completely can. But if you decide not to, this could be a nice trick to have in your belt. So currently, I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of things here. So I know that when I send this request, I'm going to get something back as next and previous. All right. So I'm going to create 3 use states. So const next page, comma, set next page. I'm going to make this equal to a use state of null. I am then going to use this for previous page. Change this for a capital P. All right, so there's my previous page. And then finally, I'm going to make one for current page. And what I'm going to initialize current page as will be the initial URL that I'm sending this request to. All right. So now when I send my request, I am going to send it to the URL of current page. When this comes back, I have data. I need to set my next and previous. So I'm going to say, hey, I want to set next page to data.info.next. And I want to set my previous page to data.info.prev for previous. So that's going to alter all 3 of these statements. And you can see that current page hasn't been called yet. Well, now at the very bottom of this entire division, I can add 2 buttons. Or, yeah, why not? Let's do 2 buttons. All right, let's go previous. And let's do a button for next. All right, now what I'm going to do is say, hey, on click, I want to set current page to previous page. And vice versa on next. I want to set current page to next page. All right, so that's going to allow me to change the value of current page. So now when I change the value of current page, I need to send this request again. So I need to add current page into my dependency list for my use effect. Let me comment this console.logout, and we'll see this console.log here shortly. I'll bring it back. So we go over to Vite. We open it up. We scroll all the way to the bottom. You can see that I have next and previous. Wow, that looks horrendous. What is going on there? Is that happening because of my display flex? It is. All right, I'm gonna change that up a little bit. Now we can see next and previous. If I click on previous, nothing happens. If I click on next, well, now it sends my request and I get the next page. And I click on next, gives me the next page. If I click on previous, it goes back one, click on next page, and so on, right? This allows me to be able to see all of the Rick and Morty characters until the final page. Now, I could put a ternary statement to account for null, right? Because we obviously don't want them to be able to send the request for null. So I would probably put a ternary statement here saying, if there is a previous page, then show previous. And then if there is a next page, then show next page, and so on. All right, Tristan?
So because if you put in that dependency inside of that use effect, it's changing what the current page is, so it can reference off it. So it's able to go to your next page and previous page.
Right. So every time that the current page changes, so it's because I have this set in those buttons and it changes the value of current page, it sends my request again. And when it sends my request, the value for my next page and my previous page changes.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're kind of just feeding off each other. Let me go ahead and demonstrate that here as well. All right, so I'm gonna come over, let me inspect this, go over to console, refresh. Where's info? All right, so there's my three. All right, so this one's my current page. This one is previous and this one is null. And actually, let me go ahead and do this. That might give us a little bit of a better visual there. So I refresh it, my request gets sent for the first time. We could see that the current page changes. Previous initial value is null. The next value is also null. So this is all what happens when I first render. Now, here, I'll do this as well. Put all three of them in the dependency list. All right, so current page starts off with their initial Rick and Morty API. The other two are set to null. Now, when the request gets sent and it comes back, current page is still set to the original Rick and Morty API. Previous comes back as null, and we see that in the documentation. All right, we run to get all characters. Previous comes back as null, which is what we expected. And next comes back as page 2. Well, when I click on next, now we have a previous page. The current page is set to page 2, and the next page is set to page 3. And that's pagination. Does anyone have any questions over that?
I did, but you just answered all my questions with
All right.
this.
Perfect. All right, great, everyone. So it looks like we just actually finished part 2 of the Rick and Morty exercise. We did that in a pretty good hour. So let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. Currently, it is 15:30. So let's go ahead and come back at 15:40 and continue on with our lecture. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'll see you back here shortly. All right, welcome back, everyone. Let's go ahead and go into our Rick and Morty part 3, where we have our character details page and a dynamic routing function to actually get to these character details page. So dynamic routing function tells me that it's going to be some sort of on-click method. It gives me a hint of utilizing the use navigate hook and also utilizing use params. So first, I'm going to take a look at the Rick and Morty API to see what I need to do in order to get a single character. It looks like all I need is the character ID. So I'm going to come over to my router. I'm going to make a new path here, where this path is going to be designed for an independent character. And it's going to receive a parameter of ID. And the element that it will render will be a character. Now, a character page does not exist, but we will create it. I'm going to import a character page from pages, a character page. All right. Now this is going to cause an error right now because that does not exist. I'm going to go into creating this. I'm going to change directory into source, pages, and I'm going to make a new page named character. Oh, excuse me. It will be a character page. And then I'm going to go ahead and code into it. Then I'm going to do const of a character page. And for now, what this will return will just be the simple division. So one, I'm going to go ahead and do an H2. I'm going to have character name eventually. And down below, I want to have an image where that image will render the actual image of said character. And then I'm going to have a UL that will render, that will render details of character. So that is my intent here. It does tell me that I want to utilize use params, and in my router, I'm specifically passing a parameter here of ID. I know this is a parameter because of a colon that I've signified in the URL pattern. So in a character page, when this gets rendered, I can say, hey, const ID is equal to use params. And by doing that, I can now utilize ID within my JSX component. All right, finally, I need to export default a character page. And that is it for this page for now. Now let me close these up here. Now, how do I get there? All right, I want to go from my characters page to a character. So here inside of my character card, I'm just simply going to add a button that says, hey, I want to see more. And I'm going to utilize the navigate function. So I'm going to go ahead and import that hook up above. I'm going to say const navigate is equal to use navigate. Oof. There you go. 5th time's the charm. All right, to use navigate. And what I'm going to do is when somebody clicks on this button, they're going to set off an on-click event that will navigate to character slash, and then here I'll utilize interpolated string to include my character ID. All right, so now if I take a look at my element and I inspect that see more, you can see that it gives me see more. It doesn't give me the on-click function, it looks like. Let me take a look at computed down here. Event listeners, layout, nope. Properties. Oh, unfortunately, it doesn't show me that it does have its independent ID on that button. Nope, it's not showing it to me. I apologize, everyone. But now, if I go and I click on one of these buttons, you can see that it takes me to my URL of character. the URL pattern of 1, and it looks like I didn't put my closing slash, which I always forget, and I want to make sure that I include that. So let me fix that. So I click on see more, sends me to my character. All right, great. If I click on, let's say Beth Smith, shows me that she has the character ID of 4. So great. That portion is working correctly. I'm able to actually iterate and get the correct ID for the independent character. That's great. Does anyone have any questions how I implement the navigate hook, how I implemented the A character page, and how that works within the router as far as passing a parameter? All right, seems like that part was straightforward. So let's go ahead and keep pushing now. Now that I have my ID, I can go ahead and actually send my request. So I can say, hey, let or const get character details be equal to an asynchronous function. Again, purely preference. I can say let data be equal to axios dot get. And here I'm going to utilize an interpolated string. Here we see get a single character. This is what I want. Copy that and paste. I see a question. Go ahead, Jacob.
You don't need a wait for this for Axios.
I do. Yes, I do need to.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. No, thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So now I'm utilizing the get method to send it to the ID. That's going to give me back the data attribute, which is this current location or this current object. So now I can say const character set character. I can say make that equal to a use state where it will be set to null. All right. So now for the character name, instead of displaying my ID, I can make sure that this gets set character to data. That will set it to my response there. So now I can say the character name will be character dot name. We can see name is one of my properties. For my image source, I can run character dot image. And for details, I can go into describing some things such as status. I'll put character dot status. And maybe instead of status, we want gender. Then we have species. Let's see what else we can do. Why not? Let's look at created. All right. So now if we take a look at our application and I click on Adolf Hitler, we get a.
You didn't import use state on your character page.
All right. So there's our first error, right? We can get, hey, we didn't have import of use state, but it looks like I did it automatically.
Ooh,
There's something else going on. Let's take a look
It's
at
ooh,
Go ahead.
you didn't have a use effect to actually call the function.
All right, awesome. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's call the function. We create our use effect. This is going to call the function of get character details. And should this have a dependency array or should the dependency array be empty?
you can throw ID in there just to be safe.
I want to throw ID in there. Great. Can you tell me why I'm throwing ID in there?
Because it'll change each time you open a new character page.
Perfect. Depending on the character ID that I'm passing as a parameter, I need to make sure that this request gets updated. All right, awesome. So it looks like we've addressed most of our errors. So let's see what's going on here. I'm gonna try to go back. All right, everything's working here. I'm gonna try to see Rick Sanchez's information.
I ran into the same problem. I had to make a set loading hook or use state hook at the top and not there. I mean, yeah, you'll have to put it there. So like you seem to have picked up what I was putting down.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And let me put this inside of a fragment tag because it is angry at me right now. All right, awesome. So now we were able to account for this. And now if I refresh my page, I can see Rick Sanchez's information. If I go over and click on Alan Rails, I can see Alan Rails information. But I do have a question for you guys. What exactly is going on here? Why did I have to have a ternary statement here to make sure that this rendered properly? And why was I getting that error earlier?
Could have been because it doesn't know if the character exists or not.
Okay, that's a very good approach. What is the value of character when this page first renders? Where can I see that?
I was actually going to ask you that a few minutes ago.
Wouldn't it be null?
I was gonna ask, is it gonna be null?
Yeah, it's actually because it's null. Right? We set it as null and we're telling it, hey, inside of null, there should be a property name. Well, it throws an error. It says, hey, there's no such thing as a property name inside of null. So because we started it as null and we're trying to access these properties that don't exist yet, we need to account for the fact that when the component renders for the first time, it may or may not be null. So we need to put a question mark saying if there is information inside of character, then render the card or our content. But if there isn't, don't render anything. Or you can have a spinner here if you want to have a nice and dandy fancy component to make it obvious that we are fetching the data. All right, does anyone have any questions over how to implement the A character page, use params, use navigate, and accounting for null?
Could you go over the use params again? I always get lost on where, like, what is ID in the use params line 6? I always get a little lost.
Of course. So use params is a function that returns an object. If we take a look at router in line 28, this is the only parameter that we passed in. And we symbolize it by having a colon. So when the browser goes through and it goes to character /10, well, we'll use params. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. There we go. Use params actually returns is it returns an object where ID has the key of 10. Right? So we're doing object destructuring here, and we're just grabbing this key value pair of ID.
And where does it pull the ID 10 from again?
So this ID 10 is coming from the URL pattern. But as far as taking it a step back from that, if we take a look at our line 47 in our card, we have a button that navigates to the character and passes in the character ID. All right, so if I click on here, we're going to see that the ID is 2. If I come back and I come all the way to the bottom or to the alien GUA, we can see that it passed the ID of 13. All right, so that's passing into the URL pattern, which is dynamic. The router identifies the ID that then gets passed into ID from the use params.
Awesome. That I think finally makes sense. And is that the same ID you use for the activist request on this same page too?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Of course. Demi?
So with React, could you have went inside of the characters.jsx file and passed in the get character as a prop to a character page and then just reuse it, or would that have been something different?
So that's something different. We haven't covered props yet. We're going to be covering props here shortly, but this is the connection between these is as a router, right? These are just pages that are being rendered. They're not receiving any children or they're not receiving anything from the parent. So
Oh,
therefore,
gotcha. Gotcha. They're like siblings, but
Exactly.
if it was an app.jsx, then you could pass it down since it would technically be a child since it's a component
Exactly.
that's being brought up. Okay, okay. Gotcha. That makes sense.
Okay, perfect. All right. Any other questions? All right, if there aren't any other questions, then let's move on into part 4 of this assignment. And in part 4 of this assignment, all we're doing is we are adding the functionality for being able to handle a favorite character. These should be able to be displayed in a favorite characters page, and we should only be able to have a total number of 4. All right, so this needs to be accessible through multiple pages. So because it needs to be accessible through multiple pages, it tells me that I need to utilize outlet context so that all the children of app are able to access this information. Great. So let's go into that. And actually, before I even start unpacking the outlet context, I want to cover utilizing a prop because now we're going to actually start utilizing our component of character card here. So I'm going to make my character card component here, const character card. And I want this to simply just return the division of my character card that I had before. So I'm just going to export default my character card. All right. So I wanted to look exactly like this. And I pretty much wanted to use the same exact parameters. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, you're going to receive a prop named character. Now I can go inside of my division, take this entire div, and bring it over to my return statement here. I'm just going to take off this key attribute. All right, that's all I'm going to do. I'm simply passing in the prop of character, or I will be passing in the prop of character. That way everything can remain the same. All right, well now in characters page, what I need to say is I want to utilize the character card, where the character is represented by the character variable, and the key is character.id. And then utilize my self-closing tag. And when I go to characters, everything remains the same. Nothing really changed. All I did was isolate that block of code. The only prop that I'm passing. So first, I'm iterating through this array of objects. I am calling each object the variable character. And for every character card, I am passing down a prop named character with the value of the character above. That then gets unpacked inside of my character card and makes it accessible in all the places where I am calling it. All right, questions? Go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, as far as the naming convention for props, could we just like do like character propped so that we could actually differentiate between which one is the actual character iteration and which one's the prop. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, let's do that.
I just feel like for readability for me, like I'd be like, okay, which character is this? You know?
That makes
So,
sense. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Let's run into character prop. And let's change this from character to character prop. And there you go. So now here is the prop in itself. It is a key because this will be determined as an object. The value is the character that comes from the iteration. And inside of the character card, well, as I said, a prop is an object. So we just utilize object destructuring to grab our entire character prop. Did that clarify things for you, Debbie? I know you've been asking about props for a while.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. So now we isolated this behavior. That's great. Now let's go into utilizing it for our use outlet context and actually adding or subtracting favorite characters. So this needs to be global. It's going to live at app.jsx. And I'm going to create a couple of functions here. So one, I'm going to say, hey, I want to create a use state for favorite characters. I'm just going to call this favorites and set favorites. I'm going to make this into a use state. And this use state is just going to be an array. And then I'm going to make two functions. So one will be add character. That takes in a character. And what this is going to do is it's going to set favorites to an array with all the values of favorites plus the character that I'm passing into the function. And then I'm going to make a new function called remove. Instead of characters, I think I should name this favorites. It's going to work pretty similarly. But instead, it's going to set favorites to favorites.filter. And it's going to return all of the elements where the current character ID is not equal to the character that is being passed in ID. All right. So there's my two functions. Does anyone have any questions regarding these two functions? Does anyone not understand these syntaxes in line 10 and line 14?
oh yeah, on line 14. So just to clarify, so you're having that char, and that char, is that a prop? Is that considered a prop too, or no?
No, that's just a parameter.
Okay, just a parameter. So like, yeah, in line 14, so what you're doing is saying, how does that work again? How you're filtering it?
Yeah, so we'll iterate through the entire list of the array.
Yeah.
And it will check if this condition is true. So for every object where the key of ID doesn't match the parameter that was passed in that has the key of ID. So as long as they don't have the matching ID, it's going to return a new array for all of the objects where the IDs don't match.
Oh.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Yeah, why'd you use that spread operator on favorites number on line 10?
Got it. So remember, favorites is a constant. So we can't utilize variable reassignment to favorites by calling favorites itself. So instead of calling favorites itself, what we're doing is we're making a new array. That spread operator is just saying that this new array has all the values that are already inside of favorites, plus the new character that is being passed as a parameter.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right, so now we've created our two functions. Maybe we want to create one for evaluating. So let's say const is a favorite. Well, let's just say is favorite. And again, this will return a character. And we'll just check if we'll return if favorites dot includes character. That should evaluate to true or false. Yeah, it returns a Boolean. Perfect. So there's the three functions that I know I'm going to need to manipulate my favorites. Well, now I need to pass them down to each one of these cards. So how could I do that? Well, I know these cards are going to be utilized within the children of the application. So I could just use outlet context. I can pass in my context. And I can pass in is favorites, add favorites, and remove favorite. All three of those functions are now part of the context within my outlet, which makes it accessible to all of the children. So let's go into the children then. I go into my character page. And in my character page, I can then grab all of these. I can say, hey, whoa, why is my navigate in here? Oh, I know why. I almost broke my application. Now that you even know that. I'm calling navigate down here and it doesn't exist. And that is because we need to import. Oh, hello. There you go. Okay, everything still works now. Perfect. All right. I apologize. Let me backtrack one more time. All right, so now I can go into characters page and I can bring in all of those functions. So I can say const is favorite, remove favorite, and add favorite. And bring those in from use, outlet, context. All right. So all of these functions are being passed down through app.jsx. Here's all three of them. They're being passed out as an outlet context. And I am receiving them within my characters page in line 7. Well, now I can pass them in as props. Go down to the character card. And add them as props. So I can say, hey, is favorite is equal to is favorite. I can also pass in remove character or remove favorite and make that equal to remove favorite. And add favorite, make that equal to add favorite. That gives me all of the character cards there. I'm able to see that everything is still rendering. Nothing has broken yet. Emphasis on yet. And now let's go into our button here. So here I'm going to go ahead and just start with the add favorite function. Oh, probably want to add those inside of my prop destruction, right? I want to grab add favorite. I want to grab is favorite. And I want to add remove favorite. So I pass them all down. Starts off at app.jsx. I create all of my functions. And I'm actually going to want to see those values as they change. So I want to log onto my console, the value of favorites, every time favorites changes. Okay, so everything gets passed down through the outlet. I can see it being unpacked inside of my characters page on line 7. And I can see it being passed down as a prop to the character card. So the character card then destructures the object of props to grab add favorites, is favorite, and remove favorite. Does anyone have any questions over how I got it all the way down to the character card?
So you could just use the context equals and it'll pass it down as a prop.
So sorry, could you say it one
In
more
that
time?
in the app.jsx. Yeah, you can in the outlet you can do context equals and pass it down as a prop.
Not as a prop, but as a use outlet context.
Gotcha.
Awesome. All right, so now I have all of my information. Let's go ahead and create a button. And what this button will do, say, add to favorites. And let's have our onClick function. That will add favorites, and we'll pass in the character. Oh, excuse me, character prop, because that's what we named it. All right, let's come over to our console. Let's refresh our page because we've been making some serious changes to it. We can see that we have no errors as of now. Our current console.log in app.jsx at line 22 tells me that my array of favorites is currently empty. So let's add Rick Sanchez. Let's add the agency director. And we can see that the information is working properly. Right? I can add people to favorites. I'm able to see them correctly. All right, so now let's handle for this add to favorites button. Maybe I only want this button to show up if that actual character isn't a favorite. So let's say, hey, I want this to turn this into a ternary statement. And I want to check if is favorite. So if this is true, takes in the character prop, then I wanted to return null. Otherwise, I wanted to return the button. All right, so let's come back to our prototype here. Let's delete our console. You can see that it shows it. Well, now when I click add to favorites for Rick Sanchez, the button is now gone. If I do it for Beth, her button is gone. If I do it for Educator, and so on, it's able to tell me, hey, this object is now included inside of the character props. So it evaluates to true and it removes that button. So now I can't add the same characters into my favorites list. Does anyone have any questions regarding that functionality so far? Okay, doesn't seem like we have any questions. So maybe instead of null, now all I want to return is a button that will remove from favorites, add an onClick function, and it utilizes remove favorite with the character prop being passed inside of it. So let's make sure it works. We refresh our site. I have no characters. I add to favorites. Now I have the Rick Sanchez. Let me add a couple here. If I come down, I can see that I have an array of 4 objects. Great. Well, now when I click for remove from favorites, we can see that Jerry Smith gets removed, and now it turns into an add to favorites. I can add Beth, and now it goes back to 3. Oh, excuse me, Summer. I remove Beth, it goes back to 3. So there I have Rick, Aberdolf Linkler, and Summer Smith. All right, does anyone have any questions over this functionality so far? All right, now how do I account for the total number of 4 characters? I don't necessarily want there to be a total number of 4 characters, or I don't want them to be able to select more than 4 characters. So I'm gonna alter this isFavorite function that I have up here. So I'm going to say, hey, if favorites.length is greater than 3, or favorites includes this. Oh, hello. Then I want to return true. Else return false. And there is a better way to write this. I know I am writing this on purpose this way so that it's easily readable for all of us. So now I'm going to go ahead and add to favorites, add to favorites, add to favorites, add to favorites. And now you can see that all of them get switched to remove from favorites. So that's maybe not something that we want there. So maybe this isn't the functionality that we need. Let me reverse this function back to what I had. And instead, I'm just going to handle it in the add to favorites. Say if favorites dot length is greater than 3, then I'm going to alert. You can only have 4 favorites. Else, we'll run that number. There you go. That should do the trick. So let's refresh it. Let's add 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now if I click on Jerry Smith, I should get, hey, you can only have 4 favorites. Nothing changed. I remove one, click on Jerry Smith again, and now Jerry Smith is my last favorite being showing up down below. And that's how you handle for 4 characters in favorites. Does anyone have any questions over that?
Can you show again how you toggled the button from add to remove favorites, please?
Of course. So that's in my character card. It is evaluating if the current character prop is in favorites. That function is app.jsx. If it is inside of favorites, it will show us the remove button. If it is not inside of favorites, it will show us the add to favorites button.
Awesome, thank you. Yep, appreciate it.
I do have a question on when you did the greater than 3. You put greater than 3, but it still allowed you to do 4. I thought it was going to cut you off at 3, but it still allowed you to do 4. But you got
Yes. So when I have 3 in my array, I can still.
it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, gotcha.
Awesome.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, no problem at all. All right. So now I'm able to manipulate my current favorite characters, but now I need to be able to display them. So now we can make our page for favorite characters. So now let's go ahead and make that page here. Let's say favorite characters .jsx. Let's code set page. And we're going to make a const favorite characters. Not going to take in any props. It's just simply going to return a statement. And for now, let's make this and h2. Let's say favorite characters. How are we doing on time? Oh, we are good on time. Good. Perfect. And let's export default or favorite characters. All right, so there's my page. Now I need to connect it inside of my router. So I'm going to come down here, make my new path. Go ahead, Gary.
You spelled the last page wrong.
Oh, rough.
Yeah, it's like fave right. Fave tie.
Thank you for letting me know, everyone. If you haven't noticed, Francisco does struggle with spelling. All right, let's do element. And here the element will be favorite characters. Right? Is that what I want? Let's
Is
see.
that a turn area or were you actually like asking a question while you were typing?
What did I misspell?
The actual
file.
JSX
Yeah.
favorite tie.
It says favorite tie characters.
Got it. It's okay. We could live with that one. Or I could live with that one. All right. So we can see that it's coming in from the, yep, I know, misspelled. All right. We can see that it's coming in from the correct path, and I have my favorite characters. Well, that gives it access to the use outlet context. So now I can say, hey, const, and I can grab all of the attributes from there. What do we need here? I need is favorite, add favorite, and remove favorite. So let's grab those. And these all come in from the use outlet context. All right. And now to actually see them. Well, now I can have I also want to pass down favorites. I apologize, everyone. Let me make that my new addition here. Because now I need to be able to iterate through them. Favorites. Okay, perfect. All right, that goes through in the context. I'm gonna go here, make sure I grab that. So now all I need to do is map through favorites, where I'm going to pass in each character object. And what I am going to return will be the character card, where the character prop is equal to character, where is favorite is equal to is favorite, where add favorite is equal to add favorite. Okay, perfect, that wrapped it. And where remove favorite is equal to remove favorite. And then we just need to pass in a key, which is going to be character.id. So now let's take a look at what we have here. I'm going to refresh my site. You can see that I have an empty array for my favorites. I'm going to add 4 of them. Now, if I try to add another one, it gives me my warning. So I can have to drop one and then add one more. All right, so there's my array of 4 objects. So everything's working well as far as adding favorites. Where's my URL pattern? I didn't add it into the URL. What do you know? All right, so now I need to add this really quick. And instead of characters, this should be favorites. Okay, it looks like I was still able to hold on to those values. So now when I click on favorites, oh, need to close this up. You can see that I mapped through it. My card is ridiculously massive. So let me go ahead and copy that division that I had in my characters page here. I just want this inline styling. All right, so we're back. Oh, there we go, favorite characters. And you can see that I have all 4 of my favorite characters being displayed here on my favorite characters page. And the functionality still works. I can still remove them, and then they're no longer displayed. I can go back to characters. You can see that they have been removed. I can add a couple more. Still get my same warning. And I can go back to my favorites and see the 4 current favorite cards that I have. Shift Alt down. Oh, is that for moving lines of code? Is that what you're saying, Gary? Thank you. All right. Does anyone have any questions over how we got this favorite characters functionality to render on the screen? All right, does anyone have any questions? Because that concludes phase 4. Does anyone have any questions over anything that we covered during this React review for the Rick and Morty exercise?
Yeah, are we gonna have to, I don't remember if you told us already, but are we gonna have to have like something from React Bootstrap, like a taskbar or anything like that for the assessment?
No, you will not have to utilize React Bootstrap.
Okay.
There is a recommendation for it, but you do not have to use it.
Okay. Fair enough. Oh, and is this gonna be uploaded to the YouTube channel too?
Yes, it will.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
This code will also go up to demos and notes. All right, let me go ahead and stop our recording then.